so glad you could join us for another edition of The Catholic View for Women, bringing you news and views from a truly Catholic perspective. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with my wonderful co-host, Janet Morana, and also Astrid Bennett Gutierrez. Okay, ladies, this next show, I should say a series of shows, are going to be dealing with a very, very sensitive topic that many people, I'm sure, have had heated discussions in their family, at the office, the water cooler, whatever. But we're talking about this quote based on this whole issue of homosexuality and the homosexual agenda. The Holy Father's comments on the way back from World Youth Day, the now famous press conference on the plane, where he was asked about this topic, and the media took "who am I to judge" as license versus what we know to be mercy. And actually, in the quote, he even reflected on the Catechism of the Catholic Church. But this has just gone really not only viral, but crazy in the last more than a year now.
Yes. Well, now, first of all, Teresa, the press conference itself covered a whole wide range of topics. As a matter of fact, we're going to have the text of that press conference on our website, and I invite everyone, read the entire press conference and see that it was not all focused on this topic. It was actually halfway through the press conference, it came out.
It's a very small segment.
Small little segment. Yeah. Small little segment. And the media, of course, took what they wanted to hear. But let's see, I have here, happen to have the exact quote that got twisted. And this is exactly what happened. The Holy Father said, "Gay people should be integrated into society instead of ostracized," Pope Francis told journalists after his week-long trip to Brazil, answering a question about reports of homosexuals in the clergy. So, you know, the Pope answered, "If someone is gay and he searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge?" Notice, you know, what happened was someone was asking him specifically about homosexuals in the clergy. He wasn't asking about him about gay marriage. He wasn't asking about all these other topics that they twisted it into. But he asked that. And notice what he said. If the person searches for the Lord and has goodwill. Okay, that to me is very, and then if you read the whole text and go on further, he quotes the Catechism.
Right, he refers to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, so which is really, really important.
We're gonna talk about a little bit later in this episode. But it's not like, you know, they pull everything he said, which was good teaching, out of context, and they take one little sentence, "who am I to judge," and they run with that. You know?
Well, I think it's important for us to hear from people who understand what's going on, understand this issue from a very, very personal perspective. And so in the next few segments, what we've done, not just on this show, but on future shows, because of requests actually from our viewers who are concerned about this topic, as we all are, because we want to reach out to people in love with the truth. We did interview, for example, in this segment, we interviewed Robin Teresa Beck. She's an author, she's a speaker, she's from my home state of Michigan. She's been on my radio program many times. She was living an active lesbian lifestyle for many, many years.
Many years.
She's written a book that's entitled "I Just Came for Ashes," where she walked into a Catholic church with a friend of hers, a woman that she was trying to have a relationship with, because a woman wanted to go to receive ashes on Ash Wednesday. And she felt the presence of God in that church, and eventually she walked away and is now teaching and speaking out about the issue and her own journey into the Catholic Church. Let's see what she has to say about this lifestyle and her perspective. Here's Robin Teresa Beck.
My story, of course, is I walked into a Catholic church 5 years ago on Ash Wednesday to receive ashes on a fluke, you know, never going to be Catholic, never going to leave gay life, and God had other plans. And, you know, it's funny, when I hit bottom 6 months later and turned my life back over to the Lord, I just thought, well, this will just be something that I'll always struggle with, and, you know, I'll be committed to being chaste. But then one thing after another started coming into my life, these ministries, and one person said, "Go get these folks to pray for you." And then I was part of a small group, and over time I just realized the desires were gone, and I began to heal, especially in my gender identity confusion. And God has just given me relationships with men that are wonderful. I have rediscovered that woman inside of me that probably never had a chance to develop. I have a friend who tells me I'm going through my teenage years, my teenage developments, which will probably be the name of my next book, Teenager Trapped in Old Body. But it's been a delight and amazing. Yeah, first and foremost, we have to hold to the truth. And the truth is that this lifestyle is destructive. It's not the way God created us. God created for men to love women and women to love men. And I think so we have to hold fast to the truth. But I think we also need to just give the love of Christ. I would say invite your loved ones to church every chance you get. And hopefully you're in a parish where the truth is being proclaimed. I mean, just the fact that we have the presence of the Lord in our midst, that really was very powerful in my life. And prayer. I mean, people kind of roll their eyes when I say, pray, pray, pray. But there's not a lot you can do with a loved one who is just gung-ho that this is my orientation, this is the way God made me, until God breaks that person. You're not going to make a lot of headway. So maybe God melts them down as they hear little bits of truth here and there and are in the presence of the Lord. But I'll tell you something, if I had a gay child, I'd be telling everybody I know, will you pray for my kid? You know, they just need to be freed from this hell that they're headed for, and that in a lot of ways they're in. Speak the truth in love. If God gives you an opportunity to just plant a seed, don't go off into a long spiel because you're either going to end up in a big fight or you're just going to push someone further away. But if you can plant a seed in love, and always, like, I would say too, if you are married and you have a relatively strong family system and you know somebody at work that's in that life, invite them over for dinner. Open up your heart and your home to them, because I think when you have a healthy marriage, there's a lot of sacramental grace. And it's funny, that sacramental grace, I think, glows and it expands, and it can help pull in someone who's in darkness into the light of Christ. I feel like Catholics are backing the, if we can call it, the gay agenda, because they're just not serious enough about their faith. And I think the other thing, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual wickedness in high places. I mean, we need to wake up and realize we're in a spiritual warfare. And people need to get serious about, we don't have the luxury of just kind of, you know, getting loosey-goosey on this issue. And I think we've been beat down by, you know, well, you're homophobic, you're intolerant, you're mean-spirited. But who wants to be any of those things? Nobody. So I think in our quest to love, we've probably, you know, swung the pendulum too far the other way. But we need to get serious, because this is, it's going to destroy our culture, and it is weakening the church. I mean, if the church can't be strong and be a place of healing, then what hope does anyone have? Well, what's available to those who are struggling is, of course, courage. But there's also what's called a shepherd's group. It's a small, I was in a group with about 6 other women. And it's amazing how healing that's been for me. They just embraced me. Nobody was struggling with this. And they embraced me, and they opened up their homes to me, and I developed healthy relationships with women because of that group. And that was something I had no clue. How do you even do? I mean, what would be appropriate? Where were the emotional boundaries? There's a ministry called Unbound Ministry, which helps a person go back and deal with all the bitterness, all the unforgiveness. That was powerful. And theophostic prayer, where you go back into your childhood and you expose the lies that you believed in childhood when you got hurt. See, long after you can't even remember the hurts, you're living the lies out that, you know, came from those painful moments, and Jesus then tells you the truth. All those things, and of course the sacraments. I mean, I would say to anybody who's struggling with this, first of all, go to reconciliation, but get anointed with oil, which is something I did probably 6 months after I came into the church. No one told me I could do it. I just assumed I need healing. Yeah, I can get my soul healed. And then the Eucharist. I mean, go as often as you can. I was with someone that I was interested in, who happened to invite me for ashes, and basically I'd have gone to get a root canal together, you know. But she said, "Let's go get ashes." Like, okay, you know. And I was so moved that afternoon by what I saw, because I was full of Catholic prejudice. I thought Catholics were a bunch of pagans, you know. Figured everybody fly in, slap those ashes on, and race out the door. But it was so reverent. And so she said, "Well, you want to come to Mass on Sunday?" It's like, you bet. And again, the reverence. difference. And the presence of God that I felt. But of course, I was interested in her, and I thought this would be the relationship that God would let me have, and, I could grow old with somebody. And so I argued for 6 months. Every week I'd be on my knees looking up at that big old crucifix and say, well, God, why can't I? Why can't I have a relationship with another woman? Why should I be alone? But then I hit the bottom in September, when that relationship just hit the skids and became as dysfunctional as every other one I'd been in. And the next morning, which would have been my 54th birthday, I got on my knees and I said, God, I'm done. You're right, I'm wrong, you've been right all along. And I walked away and didn't look back once. Yes, I think that homosexual persons feel if they can get married, their relationships will be legitimized and they'll be just as good as everybody else. But the thing that nobody talks about, the happiest people on the planet with this whole thing with same-sex relationships being able to legally marry are the divorce attorneys, because they don't last. And now they're going to have to just pay all this money and do all this legal stuff to get out of them so they can get into the next one. It's very sad. I think over 60% of lesbian women have 10 or more relationships in their lifetime. I had 12. I was a little ahead of my grade. I sat in 12-step groups with gay people for years, and I would just, we'd sit there and say, well, one week we're with somebody and the next week we're with somebody else. There's high rates of alcoholism, depression. Homosexual persons are much more likely to kill themselves than the rest of the population. And you stop and think about why don't these relationships work? Well, women do emotions. It's what we do. It's the way God made us. So a relationship with two women is like days of our lives on steroids. And guys are more sexual. And so it's, a guy can have 100 relationships throughout the course of their life. But see, when God puts men and women together, there's that balance. When we get into our drama, hopefully our husband will roll their eyes and go, whatever, honey, and walk away, because 5 minutes later, most of the time, we're over it. But not when you're with a woman, because when you get in their moment, they jump into a moment, and then it's just the downhill spiral. And you repeat that again and again and again. That's huge. And the other thing, in a relationship with men and women, there's this wonderful gift that God gives called sacramental grace. And that's huge, because we all come to our primary relationships with baggage. We just do. We're broken and wounded. But when you have that grace of God, somehow it just takes those intense, hard moments and brings peace. And you can legitimize, gay marriage all you want, but God's not going to, fall in line. He's not going to give that sacramental grace to homosexual unions. He just won't do it. I have friends who have adopted. I have friends who have been artificially inseminated and decided that, they can bring a child into the world. As a kid from a broken home, everything within me screams and goes, that is just so wrong. How does a little girl learn about her femininity if she's got two dads? How does a little boy learn about his manhood when all he's got is one mom? Now, homosexual persons will say, well, but, parents get divorced, and sometimes dads die, and kids grow up without that dad. But in those situations, God is sovereign, and He will give grace. But now you've got a whole group of people who've just decided, well, you know what, we're just going to have kids. And again, we're going to legitimize our families because now we've got kids. It's tragic. It breaks my heart.
Powerful testimony from author and speaker Robert Teresa Beck. And when we come back after the break, we'll talk more about some of the points that she made, which were very good. She talked about male-female complementarity. She talked about the love of God and how we need to go to that grace that we get in the sacraments, of course, mainly the Eucharist. And we'll also take a closer look at the Pope's statement that, as we said earlier, is still circling the globe. Who am I to judge what he really said and what he really meant? We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Catholic View for Women, where we're taking a closer look at the Pope's statement, "Who am I to judge?" Astrid, your thoughts on Robin's testimony?
What a powerful testimony to hear from her own perspective, what it meant to be brought into the church. And I think her testimony, what really stuck out for me was basically that we should really not be afraid to reach out to our sisters and brothers who are going through same-sex attraction. Sometimes we want to don't know what to do, what to say. We don't want to say the wrong thing. We don't want to turn them off. But we really should be loving witnesses, first of all, of the faith. And I love the example she gave of inviting them into your home.
I was just going to say that.
You know, if you're living a state of grace and you're going to the sacraments, then there's, God's grace is flowing there, and you can plant some seeds. And something else that she said was really interesting. She said that she saw her having this tendency towards homosexuality as a wound, something that needed healing. And when she went to the sacraments, starting with going to church and receiving the ashes, but then receiving the anointing of the sick, that she really felt God beginning to heal her, and to the point that even she began to have healthy relationships with men. How beautiful. So this was a very powerful way to invite us not to be afraid to speak the truth in love, which she says, and God really wants us to participate in this, and for us to be in charge of the discourse, not to allow the world to say what we mean, but us to really bring the gospel to life.
And this is exactly what the Holy Father was saying in the statement that he made, right. Who am I to judge? He wasn't saying this is license to do whatever you want. He was saying we need to love these people. And when he was talking about judgment, he was talking about the end times, not the end times in terms of a person's life. Who judges? God judges. God is the only one who judges the heart. And he was actually reflecting, which is in the statement, the Catechism of the Catholic Church.
That's right. And when you look at the Catechism, and in particular, I'd like to read one of the statements here that the Holy Father referred to. It's in the Catechism, and it's number 2357 to 2359, and this is what it says. Homosexuality refers to relations between men or between women who experience an exclusive or predominant sexual attraction towards persons of the same sex. It has taken a great variety of forms through the centuries and in different cultures. Its psychological genesis remains largely unexplained. Basing itself on sacred scripture, which presents homosexual acts as acts of grave depravity, tradition has always declared that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. They are contrary to the natural law. They close the sexual act to the gift of life. They do not proceed from a genuine, affective, and sexual complementarity.
Which she talked about sexual complementarity in her testimony.
Under no circumstances can they be approved. Now, again, the Catechism, and the Holy Father said, look at what the Catechism teaches.
But that never made it into any of that. All we heard
so the phrase,
was,
under no circumstances can they be approved, is what the Holy Father was referring to. He was pointing to the Catechism. And of course, they didn't. He was trying to give it a lesson on catechesis, actually, But what you just said, Teresa, about what Robin said about complementarity, I mean, that was also important, When she said, two women, it was like days of our lives on steroids, she said. Women, we tend to be very, like the three of us are together, emotional, like later at lunch or dinner, we're all chatty and imagine living like that, all day, morning to night, like that.
You don't balance each other out.
Balance each other out. Men tend to be more, quiet, and they balance out the women's bubbliness.
I think it's very sad that her story, and she does speak in Catholic circles, and she's getting out there in other Christian circles as well, but even some people in Christian circles don't want to hear from her because I think they're fearful that some people may be offended by it, or that is this really possible? But that's why I think it's important for people to hear from that this can happen, that there are some people who may not be able to move beyond it and may have to live with that attraction, live chastely like we're all called to live. But there are other people who can be healed from these certain desires, and I think that's what's so beautiful about her story, is that it's possible. But also the fact that she was able to really dive in to the church teaching and see the beauty of them. And she talked about the natural law, and I think that's very powerful. We don't hear this out there in the culture. It's so frustrating.
She mentioned that she didn't have peace within her. In fact, she called it being in hell, in essence. And so learning the truth freed her. And you look at her, you listen to her, she's a woman who's free. She has peace. And then God did, change her, but if people
She's
are
so
not.
in love with the Lord.
Yeah.
Because when we were going to do the interview, Janet and I, she spent, I think, about 45 minutes just sitting in the church, just praying in front of the tabernacle because she just wanted to be close to God.
Before the
see
interview.
You could see it in her face. I mean, she really is just glowing. And I think, too, the important thing is for us as Catholics, as you said, Janet, to look at things in context. People don't do that. And also to understand the teachings of the church. We're all called to live chastely. I was telling you ladies before we began taping that I had an interesting experience during the canonization when I was interviewed for a documentary of an affiliate back home, and I was explaining the church teaching to the anchorman, and when the story aired, he said the Catholic Church says that homosexuals have to live chastely, and I told him specifically, even gave him the catechism reference, where it says we're all called to live chastely. Sex outside of marriage, marriage being between a man and a woman, is what the church says is off limits. The sexuality has a specific purpose within a godly marriage. That never made it on the airwaves. Just as if just the Pope's statement, who might have judged, didn't go any further. That's all they used.
Yeah, they didn't use the whole statement. But the other thing, too, I like to think about Robin was she lived in that lifestyle. Like, heard what she said. You know, about 2 decades in the lifestyle, a dozen partners. You know, it wasn't like she suddenly, it took a long period of time of probably her life going, like she said, hitting rock bottom, but it was years of in the lifestyle, and she was searching, and that final relationship that finally went bad was when she got the ashes with that girl, and I assume they probably just went in like as a goof, like, oh yeah, well, let's go get some ashes, and God really, because the grace, I always remember, and for the years I was away from the church, I always remember Father Pavone telling me, God's grace is always there, but we're not opening the door to receive it. And that's basically what Robin was doing. His grace was always there. His grace is sufficient. But she was like this, not listening or paying attention. And that ashes probably was that first, reminding of my grace is here, But and then it didn't take, it wasn't instantaneous either. It took her another 6 months of still trying to build that final relationship that she thought she was going to be happy.
And I think, don't you think, Astrid and Janet, she makes a good point about, as you said earlier, opening up your home and your heart and loving the person where they're at. That doesn't mean that you diminish the truth or you push the truth aside, but you can't feed a baby steak, and everybody is going to be ready for the message that you have. So you love them, and then if a question comes up, you answer that, and you pray. She said prayer, really important prayer.
Yeah. Yes, like in the Hispanic community, it's something where it's not really talked about. It's kind of accepted. Now in the media, it's something that's come out, and now with the Pope's comments, we've seen something similar happen in the Hispanic secular media where they are distorting the comment. And unfortunately, there is a lack of catechesis too in our Hispanic community where they don't know how to make sense of this teaching, because I think we live in a world where sex has been put on as a god. So to say that somebody has to live in a way that they will not be able to have sex because that's what it means for them to live chastely, then it's just, there's this dissonance that's hard to accept. I think we have to go to the beginning and explain why God created men and women and the gift of sexuality.
And also look at the fallout from this rampant over-sexualized culture that we have. And then we're not just talking about people who are engaging in homosexual activity, but just in general, in terms of the sexuality, the sexually transmitted diseases. You see that in your work and what's happening. There is a reason that God designed us a certain way and for a specific purpose.
Well, notice too, just as a reminder, when you say Robin's a speaker, she's very involved with the Courage Ministry.
Right.
And for those viewers who don't know what that is, it's a ministry within the Catholic Church. It was founded by Father Harvey. Beautiful ministry. And this is to assist gay people to live a chaste lifestyle. So she's connected with that. And then for parents who have children who are gay, there's Encourage, which is the offshoot
another
of
beautiful
that.
ministry. Well, we only have about 2 minutes left, believe it or not. So let's go over the homework assignment.
Homework time. The teacher is calling the class to order. Well, first, I want to encourage everyone to read the Pope Francis's, not just the quote, who am I to judge, but I would like you to read the entire press conference. We'll have the link on our website because you have to get the whole context and read everything he said. But then to back up what he said, you're going to read the catechism. We're going to have verses 2357 to 59 and also 2358 and all those. You're going to read all that. Finally, we're going to have the link to the Courage website, which is couragerc.net. There's a wealth of information up there. Matter of fact, there's a new program out for parishes, a DVD that they can obtain and get that information. And finally, Robin Teresa Beck, our speaker, will have a link to how to get her book and how to contact Courage if you'd like her to come and speak in your area. Important, very
yes,
important
absolutely.
homework.
And I think also just a reminder to always, one of my favorite scripture verses that I quoted without mentioning the actual verse earlier in the opening of the show was 1 Peter 3:15. Always be ready to give a defense for the hope that is within you, but to do it with gentleness and reverence.
Exactly.
You remember that old hymn, "They shall know we are Christians"?
By our love. By our love.
By our love.
By our
love
love.
them, love one another.
Absolutely.
Well, this is a very dynamic conversation, which we will continue in the next episode of The Catholic View for Women. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with Janet Morana and Astrid Bennett Gutierrez. Thanks for joining us, and don't forget to visit our website and our Facebook page. You can find them both, CatholicViewForWomen.com. We'll see you next time.